Hello, once again, this is Deborah Kitko with the Wayne County Public Library. As I promised, I'm coming back with another segment on utilizing vital records and US Census records in your research and trying to resolve conflict that may occur within some of these records. So we've already looked at Ralph Albert Keener, and this next segment is going to look at Benjamin Harrison Keener, being another generation back from my grandfather. And we have verified the connection through other records about this family, this father-son connection. So if you have not subscribed, I encourage you to subscribe now and let me know what you think of this next segment. Okay, so we're going to now start with Benjamin Harrison Keener. And he was born 1888, died in 1965. And so, you know, he had been living between the 1900 and the 1940 U.S. Census records. So we're going to take a careful look at these and see what we can find out about these particular census records and go back into the 1910 and 1900 a little more detailed. So sit back, enjoy it, and hopefully you find this rewarding. Okay, during the first couple parts of now analyzing these census records and the vital records and using them to actually do your research, we've talked about Ralph A. Keener, and the second segment is going to be on Benjamin Harrison Keener, who would be his father. The first segment only focused on the 1920, 1930, and 1940 census, and that's because my grandfather was born in 1919. He's not going to be in any census prior to his birth, and 1940 is the most recent census record you can get the family data from. The 1950 census will not become available until 2022. So for now, for another couple years, we only have through the 1940 census. So Benjamin Harrison Keener, this is a picture of my great-grandfather. He was born 1888 and died in 1965. He was actually born in Indiana and died in Akron, Summit County, Ohio. So we're going to give a recap a little bit. We've already explored the U.S. Census records from 1920 to 1940. We know that Benjamin Harrison Keener should be found in the U.S. Census records from 1900 to 1940. He was born about 1888, didn't die until 1965. And we know from our understanding that the 1890 census, most of that was destroyed. And we're going to talk about that during this segment as well. So we're going to go back and take a look at some of these census records. And the 1940 census, like I said, is the most recent one that's available. So we're going to take a look. So in this presentation, I'm going to continue on with the 1910 census and the 1900 census. Remember, we go backwards. We work with the more recent, and we go backwards in time. So we're going to go back to FindAGrave. Yes, I know that sometimes this is secondary information, and sometimes the information may or may not be accurate, but we want to have that as a starting point, especially if you don't know much else about your information. According to FindAGrave, Benjamin Harrison Keener was born on the 3rd of November, 1888 in LaGrove Township, Wabash County, Indiana. He died on March 23, 1965 in Akron, Summit County, Ohio. We know from the FindAGrave entry that his parents were given as Isaac Keener and Melissa Jane Enyart Keener. And there's only 3 siblings listed: Margaret Ellen Keener Hodson, Albert Keener, Grace Keener, and Grace Keener Enyart. Now, a lot of times people say, well, my ancestor had more siblings than what's listed on FindAGrave. Once again, you have to keep in mind, FindAGrave is actually a narrative. It's what individuals have added to the family, to that website. And so you're not going to find complete information all the time on this website. So once again, you're going to have to go through the process. We do want to try to verify that indeed he was born on 3rd November 1888. We do want to try to verify he was born in LaGrove Township, Wabash County, Indiana. We do want to verify when he died. We want to try to verify his parents' names, and we also may want to take a look at some of the siblings as well. These may be important when you're looking with other common names to know whether you are actually researching the right branch of the family or a wrong branch of the family. So we've already talked a little bit from the last session. Why are we using FindAGrave? Although we know the information is secondary or subject to error, it's still going to provide clues to your ancestor. And like I said last session, remember that many of the resources we use as genealogists include secondary information. And a lot of times you're going to find inaccurate information even on original documents because the information is given secondhand. For example, you have original resource such as a death certificate, includes both primary and secondary information. You're hoping that they have the name of the deceased correct. You're hoping you have the death date correct. You're hoping that they have the cause of death correct. The other information, his birthplace, his birth date, his parents' names, the places of birth of his parents, and that kind of information is all going to be secondary depending on how informed the informant is. So once again, this is one original source, the death certificate, but it includes both primary and secondary information. Likewise, obituaries include secondary information. At all times, you need to try to verify information, whether it is primary, whether it is secondary, whether it's original source or derivative source, etc. So if you go on the Ancestry Library Edition, which we do subscribe to here in our library, you're going to find a World War II draft registration card. This was completed in 1942, and you'll see that this was pretty much what they nicknamed the old man's draft. So any male who was born on or after April 28, 1877 and on or before February 16, 1897 had to actually fill out this draft registration. And according to this draft registration, we see that you have Benjamin Harrison Keener, and it gives his address as 737 Upson Street there in Akron, Summit County. Mailing address is the same. It gives his age as being 53. Now, he's the one giving this information, and he indicates that his place of birth is LaGrow, Indiana. It gives that he has no phone number, but his date of birth would be the 3rd of November, 1888. And it also gives that his name and address of the person who will always know his address is Grace Keener. Now, this very well could be his daughter, or it could be his sister. I'm not sure at this point. We have to do the research to figure it out. We also give that he is employed by the city of Akron, and he's basically a street cleaner there. And you'll notice that he signed at B.H. Keener. Now, sometimes you'll see how the signature is. You may find in the census records and other sites that they have actually abstracted the record to be K-U-N-E-R instead of K-E-E-N-E-R. So you have to keep that in mind. This is the 1940 census for Benjamin Keener. As you recall last time, Ralph Albert Keener was not living with his biological dad in the 1940 census. We had to figure out if the Benjamin Keener was still living or if there was a divorce or what took place. And we also know he died in 1965, so knowing this information, we figured we would find him in the 1940 census. And here he is in the 1940 census, and this is a blow-up picture. And he's living on South 4th Street, which is near the downtown area. And it shows that Benjamin Keener is the head of the household. He's age 50, and he's born in Indiana, and he is married to a Mary. And knowing the information, this would be Mary Barrett. So this is going to be a second marriage for Benjamin, and I only know that because I have a little bit of insight into the family. But we're going to actually go through systematically and figure out just how I can verify if this indeed is the second marriage of him. So there's other information. I'm not going to go in much detail about the 1940, 1930, 1920 census because we talked about that with Ralph Albert Keener. So I'm just going ahead and move ahead here. This is the second marriage record of Benjamin Keener. Once again, this was found. I found an abstract on Ancestry, but I went into Family Search to do a search, and they're partners with the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History, otherwise the West Virginia Archives. And the West Virginia Archives actually has birth, death, and marriage records for certain periods of time available free of charge on their website. So this is the marriage record of Benjamin Harrison Keener, who was married to a Mary Elizabeth Barrett on July 19, 1938 in Brooke County, West Virginia. And you'll notice on here that he is age 50 and Mary Elizabeth is age 52. It shows that he was actually born in LaGrow, Indiana, and that she was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And of course, you look at the 1940 census, it does show that her birthplace is Pennsylvania. It also shows that they're both residents of Akron, Ohio, but they are getting married down in West Virginia. This seemed to be one of those Gretna greens that a lot of people would flock to West Virginia because you didn't have a waiting period for marriages like you did up here in Ohio, or at least in this part of Ohio. So we know then that they're actually married on 19th of July, 1938. And there's some other information in here in terms of who the minister of the gospel is. You don't want to ignore that type of information. It may prove to be beneficial later on down the road if you need to look through church records. 1930 census, we do find Benjamin Keener with Delight Keener, and they are with my grandfather and a couple of the kids. Actually, there's 4 children, 3 nephews and 1 niece residing with the family. And these nephews and a niece, they have the last name Todd, T-O-D-D. So this is going to be a sideline. You don't want to, stop what you're doing now to actually research the Todd family, but you may eventually want to go back and research this family and see how they tie in with the family. This is an image of the 1930 US Census for Pike Township, Fulton County, Ohio. We've already seen this in some of the previous records. But I have it on 2 pages, so you'll see that the first page here, you'll have Benjamin and Delight Keener, and you have Ralph, and you have a couple of the other kids listed there. And then on the second page, you'll end up seeing the Todd family. So this is the enlarged version of the 1930 census. They are Benjamin Keener is residing in Pike Township, Fulton County, Ohio. And you'll see he's age 41. Born in Indiana. Delight is age 31, born in Indiana. We see over in this column that you have a male, and you see a 27, you see a 16. In this particular census, the census taker was asked to give how old they were at the time of their first marriage. Okay? So that's going to give you a clue, and I want you to keep that in mind for later on whenever we do find their first marriage, and see if you find a discrepancy there. You'll see Ralph A. Keener, he's age 11, born in Indiana, and Pauline B., the next child, is age 8, born in Ohio. So this gives you a clue that, they were moved from Indiana over to Ohio sometime between the birth of these 2 kids, or between 1919 and 1922. And the picture shown in the previous segment actually showed a picture of the truck getting caught in the mud, that picture being dated around 1920, 1921 time period. You'll see Gene L., who's a son, age 7, born in Ohio. Gerald L., who's a son, age 7, born in Ohio, and yes, they were twins. And then you'll see that Raymond S. Todd, who's a nephew. You'll see a Walter, who's a nephew, a Thelma, who's a niece, and a Richard C., who's a nephew. And these 4 kids have the last name Todd, and for some reason they are living with their uncle and aunt in the 1930 census. So you'll want to not get sidetracked with them at this point, but eventually you'll want to go back and visit them. And you'll notice that their birthplace is New York. At least of the 2 oldest kids, Raymond and Walter's New York. And then Thelma is born in Michigan, and Richard's born in Illinois. So that to me, it's like, as a genealogist, I wonder what in the world is going on here. So I'm going to want to set them aside and research them at a later point to figure out what's going on with that family dynamic. 1920 census, they're in Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, and he is with his wife Delight and the son Ralph L. A. Keener. We saw this in a previous segment. And this is a census image of the 1920 census for Fort Wayne City. And you'll notice this was taken the 12th and 13th day of January 1920. Here's an enlarged version, and you'll notice that there's an Edith Brindle, who's a cousin living there. Now, I do know from the records, when I was researching Ralph Keener, that the Light's maiden name is Brindle. So I'm going to guess this is going to be a cousin on the maternal side of the family. But you're going to want to research Edith later on. She may be proved to be beneficial to sort through some records at a later point. And you'll notice that they're on Morrison Street there in Fort Wayne. So you're going to ask yourself, well, when did Benjamin marry Delight? We already found the marriage record when Benjamin was secondly married to Mary, Elizabeth. Looking at Ancestry, we do find a marriage record for Benjamin Delight on the 15th of December 1915 in Huntington County, Indiana. The Ancestry, I don't believe, gives the actual image. I had to go on the family search and actually pull up the image there. But you'll notice that there's another conflict that means resolved. In this particular, in the marriage record, it indicates that Benjamin Keener's birth year is 1890, where other sources indicate he was born in 1888. Is there a possible reason why this birth year may have been recorded inaccurately? Here's a copy of the birth record. And here's a summary. I've abstracted it over here on the right-hand side if you're looking at the screen. That Benjamin H. Keener was age 25, born November 30th, 1890 in LaGrow, Indiana. He's the son of Isaac Keener and Melissa J. Enyart. You have Delight D. Brindle, age 20, born December 31st, 1895 in Wabash, Indiana. She's the daughter of Asa Brindle and Lorena A. Slusher. Now you notice on the 1930 census, though, it gave their ages as being 27 and 16. That's a little bit different than 25 and 20. So, something else is going on here. If you further look down, you'll notice that one of the informants or one of the witnesses is a Mrs. Sadie Bolus. Now I'm going to guess that's a family member. Delight definitely would have been under the age of being legally married without having a parent or guardian sign off or some adult sign off on them. And we're noticing that, Benjamin is age 25, but by rights, there's a little bit of discrepancy there. So we're going to have to resolve this issue also. So, was Benjamin Harrison born on the 3rd of November, 1888, or was he born on the 3rd of November, 1890? But also it indicates that he was born, he was first married at the age of 27, which definitely doesn't give the right date here. So, but let's continue looking at other records. So this is the 1910 census for Fort Wayne. They're in Ward 8, they're in Allen County. And here's a blow-up version of the 1910 census. And there is Isaac Keener and Melissa and Benjamin H. Inez, and here's Sarah. From the marriage record, remember there's a Sadie Bowles. Sadie is a nickname for Sarah. However, I doubt, in 5 years' time that Sarah could be the one who's getting married and actually giving the information. So there may be another Sarah, another Sadie we need to take a look at. You'll also see that there's a grandson living here, Ernest McLaren. We need to figure out who he is. And then you have the Fall family, F-A-H-L. You have Philip and you have Grace. Grace being a daughter, if you remember from the World War II draft registration, there was a Grace listed as being the one person who would know at all times where Benjamin was. So that very well could be the sister. And then you have two grandchildren here. You have a Hugh and you have Ralph J. Apparently Ralph must be a name that runs in this family. This would be the couple generations here that we found the Ralph name. If you look back to the 1900 census, this by far is the best census record that the government has taken. That being that it actually is the only census that includes not only the birth year, but the birth month of each individual in the household. Now, in other census records, you're going to find if they are married within a year or born within the year, you will find that information there as well in terms of the month and the year. But for everyone in the household, this is definitely the first census that provides that information. This is also the first census that provides how many years that they've been married. So this is showing that Isaac and Melissa here were actually married 26 years ago. And you'll notice that Melissa has a 7 and a 7 over here. This is the first census that provided for each female how many kids were born to them and how many were still living. So this is showing that there are at least 7 kids, all of whom are still living. From FindAGrave record, they only showed about 3 of the siblings of Benjamin. We know there's at least 4 others here that are not accounted for on FindAGrave. So once again, FindAGrave has incomplete information, although it's good. You also notice here that this gives that Benjamin's nickname must have been Bernie. And it shows that he was born November 1888 here in Indiana. You'll see the other kids listed as well. So you'll see Ernest, who's a grandson. He's going by the last name Keener at this point. And from the previous census, he's going by his actual biological name. So you have to keep that in mind when you have different relationships in the household. The census taker may have automatically assumed that the individual was underneath the name of the head of the household. In this case, Ernest must have been he had definitely a different last name than Keener. And then you also see Annie, who's a sister living there. And it gives her birth year as well. If you're looking at immigration information, this is also one of the first census records that provides some immigrant information for you as well in terms of when the year they're immigrated, and how many years they've been a U.S. citizen, etc. And we'll look at that in another segment where we're talking about immigration and naturalization records. So here's a birth year summary to date. So on FindAGrave, we see that he was born November 3rd, 1888. World War II draft registration taken in 1942 indicates his birth year is November 3rd, 1888. 1940, census indicates that he was born about 1889, being about age 51. The 1938 marriage record gives his age is 50, so that verifies he was born about 1888. The 1930 and the 1920 census indicates he was born about 1889. The 1915 record indicates he was born in about 1890. 1910 puts him at 1889 again, or 1888, depending on when his birthday fell. And the 1900 census, he's age 11, born November 1888. At this point, there's been no birth record found on Benjamin Harrison Keener. The state of Indiana started mandating recording of births in 1882. So there should be a birth record for him if it has survived the times, but I know that the courthouses, there was a fire in 1870, which would have an impact on the birth records. So I have not been able to physically find the birth record yet to try to verify if this is the correct year or not. So the outlier there is the 1890 date given on the marriage record. And you sort of wonder, would there be a reason why he may have lied about how old he was? And so you have to sort of keep that in mind. And it could be because there's an age discrepancy there. Now, he was born 1888, so he should have been included on the 1890 census. Unfortunately, the 1890 census has not survived, and that's on the whole federal level and national level. There's been a few fragments that have been survived. There are some supplemental information. There may be some place that's actually been recreated in the 1890 census. But for general overall, the United States Census was for 1890. If you want to find out about the fate of the 1890 census, there's an excellent two-part article found on the National Archives website, once again, www.archives.gov. And it talks about the fate of the 1921 fire located in the basement of the Commerce Building there in Washington, D.C. And just to give a brief synopsis of it, there was smoke that was reported on January 10th, 1921, about 5 o'clock p.m. About 5:30, the firemen arrived. The fire was contained in the basement of the Commerce Center, Commerce Building. Supposedly there was a fireproof flooring or ceiling there that prevented it from being spread to the other levels, which is actually a good thing for our records. The fire was extinguished by about 9:45 that night. However, the firemen continued to pour water on the remains of the fire until about 10:30, probably just to make sure that all the ashes were out and that there was no flare-up or anything like that. The initial analysis or assessment of the fire was that 25% of the 1890 U.S. Census was declared destroyed. 50% of the U.S. Census was considered damaged by smoke, water, or fire. At this point, 1921, we did not know what we know now about preserving the records. If it's only damaged by smoke or by water, we actually could establish those records knowing the technology we have today. You can actually freeze dry that stuff and you can actually recreate them. But they didn't have this knowledge back in the day. Those damaged U.S. Census records remained in storage from 1921 to about 1934 and 1935. There's a little bit of dispute in terms of how long they actually stayed there. Finally, on February 21st, 1933, Congress had authorized the destruction of the 1890 U.S. Census, deeming that it was not of historical value. So we're not going to find it in the 1890 census, which means that the 1900 is the first one he's going to appear in the census records. Now, why does this present a problem? The U.S. Census was taken only every 10 years. I mean, there's a few exceptions that you'd have like a state census or a territory census taken, within 5 years of that 10-year time period. If you have a daughter that was born in 1881, chances are she would have been married by the 1900 census. So you're not going to find that daughter, or in some cases you may not find the male, the son, living with their family in 1880 census, and they're going to be out on their own by the 1900 census. So you have a 20-year gap that you have to deal with. Although I cannot find an actual, a lot of documents that verify that he was actually born on November 3rd, 1888, I'm going to go with the marriage record basically what the 1900 census indicated, that he was born November 1888, and I'm going with the second marriage record indicating he's about 50 years old at the time of his birth, meaning he was born about 1888. I'm going to discard some of the other data that I have. So right now, I'm going to go with the theory that he was born on November 3rd, 1888, until I can otherwise prove that to be false or prove that to be true. That's where it's going to stand. And I'm just going to use that based on the census records and on the marriage records. Going back to the first marriage record, his parents were Isaac Keener and Melissa Jane Inyart, so that I can verify that, I find him in the 1900 and 1910 census with his parents, Isaac and Melissa, although Melissa is spelled many different ways. Although his birth date is given as 1890, there's a possibility on that first marriage record that he wanted to appear a little bit younger, since his bride supposedly was only 20 years old. Of course, other resources indicate she was a little bit younger than that. And of course, we want to research this Mrs. Sadie Bowles to see what relationship she would be. You don't want to ignore some of these other collateral lines on there. So at this point, through these three segments, we have taken a look at the 1940, the 1930, the 1920, the 1910, and the 1900 census. We've looked at the fate of the 1890 census. I'm hoping that this is helping you. There's a lot of other little nooks and crannies that you want to look at with these census records. You definitely do not want to ignore just the other part of the census. Don't get so tied up with the names and the dates that you lose the other information, because you're going to find property information on there, whether they're owning, whether they're renting, whether they're owning a farm, whether they're renting a house, etc. So there's other clues on these census records that you're going to want to pay attention to. Pay attention to the small print, basically. The next segment, so at this point, using the census records, we have went back 3 generations. My grandfather being generation number 1, his father Benjamin Keener being generation 2. They are now taking them back to Isaac Keener, which is the 3rd generation, back from Ralph. So we're making progress here through this census record. It's not always accurate, but at least there's some information that we can provide and some clues you can pick up. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me or make a comment here on the Facebook page or on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, I do encourage you to do so. There's a lot of other good information, not only related to genealogy, but there's some do-it-yourself projects, some reviews, some book reviews, a lot of good information on there. We're still trying to get to our minimum number of 100 subscribers to our YouTube station so we can actually brand it. So I would encourage you to take a few moments and just click on that subscribe button and subscribe. And until next time, continue hunting, continue using those census records, and I'll check back with you in a little bit here, and we'll continue on looking at the pre-1890 census records. So I'll talk to you later. Bye. So now within this 3-part series, we've looked at the 1940, clear back to the 1900 census. We've talked about the fate of the 1890 census. We can actually... We've also went back 3 generations. So we have my grandfather, Ralph Albert Keener. We have his father, Benjamin Harrison Keener. And then we go back a 3rd generation to Isaac Keener. We found him through the records. And this is just through some of the vital records we found, through marriage records, obituaries, FindAGrave, through the US Census records. And so the next segment I'll be recording will be talking about before, going with the 1880 census and before. As you get further back with the census records, these become a little more tricky, a little more challenging, and the information is not quite as profitable, although they can be used in many ways to help recreate your family. So if you have not subscribed, I encourage you to push that subscribe button and subscribe to the Wayne County Public Library's YouTube station. This is Deborah Kitcode, Wayne County Genealogy Librarian. Just checking out for now.